4 o'clock.
It's 4 o'clock.
We often start introductions, and then by the time we finish, more people have arrived. Oh, good. Here comes AJ. Yeah.
Give me that look like I'm sorry. There you go. Anything else you say of food? Oh,
Good, how are you?
Sure.
That's exactly what I thought. Figure this game.
How are you doing, John?
Good.
Oh, yeah.
All right. All right. Welcome, everybody. We're here to talk about MOOCs. Thank you, Kevin.
I have that big foam finger, man.
Okay. So we're here to talk about MOOCs, massively open online courses. And this is the Learning Technology Group meeting, once a month meeting. And before we go into this conversation, I want to say that next month's meeting is going to focus on Canvas, and we'll have members of the fall Canvas pilot who will be here too, and actually not here, we're going to do it in the Viking Union. And we're moving it to noon, so we'll have a noon Thursday. And welcome. And so today our conversation is about MOOCs, and we're going to start out with introductions. My name is Justina Brown, Center for Instructional Innovation and Assessment. And we'll just go around the room and hear what you have to say about MOOCs. And John Farquhar will talk a little bit more in an overview sense, and Andrew Blick from Extended Ed will talk about what he learned at a recent conference too. So when you introduce yourself, if you could please tell us why you're here, what you're interested in regarding MOOCs, and what you know. We have a couple videos we could show if you're interested. So it depends on if you're already a professional MOOCer. So please go ahead. You want to end or begin?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine starting. So, if you don't know me, I'm John Farquhar. I work for ATOS, and we've recently reorganized such that I manage a group called Teaching, Learning, and Technology, and so we're very interested in these aspects of how teaching, learning, and technology interface. And I'm hoping, when we set up this agenda for this particular topic, MOOCs, we didn't really have anything in mind other than to have a conversation about it and to want to know what your interest in this topic was. Certainly for me, supporting online learning for 20 years now, it's a very interesting topic for me. And I participated in a MOOC this past fall on the history of the Internet, which was interesting content-wise, but I was rather disappointed in its delivery, and I'd be happy to share more information about my experience. It was on the Coursera platform, and I did get a lot out of it, but I was disappointed overall in how that was delivered. So I don't really have anything that I'm inquiring about it, other than I want to hear from you all as to what interests you about MOOCs. So.
I'm AJ Barce. I also work with ATOS. I'm with John. Basically, my background in it is I did a lot of research in my graduate study in online distance learning and discourse analysis in the online environment. So I just saw your email and I wanted to pop in and get caught up with what's been going on the last 4 years. So.
Gabe Gossett. I'm from the libraries, and I guess my MOOC experience has been that I've signed up for a number of MOOC classes, but never actually followed through and participated.
I got my badge. I got my certificate. I actually
Okay.
completed one, yes.
Yeah, I keep intending to do like some of the basic programming stuff just to get some familiarity with it, because it seems like that would be really good for the MOOC stuff. Just haven't. The time always evaporates into other things that I actually have to do rather than what I want to do. So it's just something that's of interest in that. Especially I think for developing skills, I think there might be things to.
I'm Ryer Banta with the libraries. I'm a new person there, and yeah, much like Gabe here, I love the idea of MOOCs, but I often find myself not having enough time to make the commitment for the ones where you're kind of locked in. But I'm certainly very interested in learning about the attitudes here on campus, about how it interfaces with what we do, what online courses go on here, whether it's seen as a competitive thing or a complementary thing.
I'm Leanne Martin. I'm the Associate Dean for Humanities and Social Sciences and also part-time faculty member in PEH, a half-time faculty member in PEHR. And I have limited knowledge of MOOCs, and so I'm here to learn about them. But also what I know about them, they seem to be a model that works in universities that are quite different from ours. And so I, like you, would want to know if it works in this environment, but I'm basically here just to learn more.
I'm Elizabeth Stevens, also in the libraries. Sorry. I'm a coordinator of instruction. I've never personally been involved with a MOOC or done anything with them. I've followed some of the, I guess, controversy, through the Chronicle and some other things. So I'm here just to kind of learn.
Great. Marty.
I'm Marty, and I'm at the bookstore. I do the accounting there, and I'm interested in learning and also having a sense for people at the bookstore of how the bookstore might be affected, as these kind of classes increase.
I'm Andrew Blick. I'm from Extended Education, and I'm the e-learning specialist, so my interest in this is kind of just to hear what the dialogue is pertaining to MOOCs, especially from faculty, how they're perceiving them as far as quality is concerned and a number of other things. So, and I'm mostly interested to hear what this dialogue brings up.
I'm Jill from Human Services, the program. And sorry, I came in late. I'm not even sure what a MOOC is.
I'm Peter Agrance, the instructional designer at ATUS, and I've been working with learning management systems for almost 20 years now and involved in online learning. I know a fair amount about MOOCs, and I really think that in some ways we're looking at, in order for them to be successful, we're going to have a societal shift. That I think that learning simply to become a better person, to know more and to gain knowledge has got to be a popular thing again. Versus going to school for a degree to get a job. And I've talked to older people, like my dad, who's been a professor all of his life, and he said when he started teaching that his experience was much different than today. That going to school was to learn, to expand your knowledge, to become a better person, and had much less to do with going and getting a job when you got out. So because MOOCs are generally not for credit, or a lot of them are for non-credit, they're not part of a program at a school, I think in order for them to really become popular and successful, people have got to be interested in learning just simply for the act of learning new things. My opinion.
I'm Kevin Dixie. I'm an instructional technologist. I work with Peter and one of John's minions. I think...
Is that your official title?
Yeah,
John's
minion.
Okay.
John's minion. I think MOOCs present a sort of interesting challenge for traditional universities because I think that there is a growing sentiment out there with students, because I've heard it told to me several times by students, this idea that sort of information, all the information they need is out there on the internet. So I think things like MOOCs will be attractive to people with that kind of opinion, and I think it just presents a really interesting conundrum for universities, how to deal with that. I think it's something that can't be ignored. Also, am I the only one who thinks it's hilarious that a term that means bonehead is the acronym for this? I'm a big Scorsese fan, so that's it.
Thank you. I'm Justina Brown, Center for Instructional Innovation, Western's Teaching and Learning Center, and I am always following what is in the teaching and learning media and what's in my listservs, and the, MOOCs have just been exploding. There's articles every 2 days, and to even put a resource list together is almost impossible. I mean, I found a really significant article about MOOCs that was a year and a half old, and it just seemed ancient, you know. So I think it's a very interesting conversation. Like you said, I'm not sure how it fits in at Western, but it definitely has some ramifications. You know, there's things that we need to be aware of and to find our place in the future as these come forth. So.
I'm Philip Nordwall. I'm in computer science. I'm the systems manager. Definitely interested in how education interplays with education. One of the main reasons I'm interested in MOOCs is I think our country going forward is going to have a large problem educating the number of people we have coming through in a cost-effective manner. I see costs of education going way up, and I think MOOCs are going to, and what's going on right now, is going to figure out how we can fan out the expertise and make it cost-effective for our society to educate people in areas that is needed, as well as either in terms of a degree or in skill sets. I also love learning. I actually participated in that class last fall in a machine learning and wanted to take a chance to compare classes I'd taken at the undergrad and grad level here at the university with basically the same titles, similar classes, same classes that are being taught elsewhere through this manner. And I've done that with probably about 4 different classes now. So.
I'm Dawn Dietrich. I'm faculty in the English department and the director of Western Reads, and my research area is in the transition from print to digital culture, so I'm really interested in the way that pedagogy may be affected by a lot of these new digital technologies. And a large question for me really is, I've been reading a lot. I haven't participated in one, but whether or not this whole kind of larger movement of DIY learning is going to impact colleges, whether or not the momentum of being able to have 60,000 students take a course and attain skill sets online for free is going to put pressure on higher ed institutions to begin crediting those skill sets and competencies. And then, of course, I agree with you with the whole larger economic pressure on this. So I think we're going to be hugely impacted in one way or another by digital technologies. If not this model, then many of the others that are currently giving students much more choice at a much greater reduced cost.
I'm Mason Bowley. I'm a grad student at the computer science department. I've taken a number of online courses, and that's interesting to me in my research. So,
Great.
I'm Linda Beckman. I'm the budget director for Enrollment Student Services. I'm in the bookstore, so that's one angle I look at. Also, just from an enrollment planning perspective, whether or not Western gets into this or our students just take advantage of it, it's going to have fiscal and programmatic and planning impacts for us. I agree with what you said too. How important it is to offer different kinds of learning opportunities and cost.
Well, it's great to see such diversity among the representation here at this meeting. And we just at this meeting, we don't really like to prepare much of an agenda, much of a program. We like to have much more of a conversation about these things. But I do think because there's so many of us, I think it'd be appropriate to play at least a short clip of one of these videos, just so that we're all on the same page as to what we're talking about in terms of a MOOC. I like to think that the acronym actually stands for Massively Overhyped Online Course, but there's a different term that people use, and so I think that's the first one. Just 6 minutes in the first one, or which one do you want to play?
I think we can play this one.
A couple of TED Talks.
Let's see, can we get this bigger? Yes, okay.
We'll start playing probably.
So again, we'll only play a few minutes of each of these videos.
Everyone is both a learner and a teacher. This is me being inspired by my first tutor, my mom. And this is me teaching Introduction to Artificial Intelligence to 200 students at Stanford University. Now, the students and I enjoyed the class, but it occurred to me that while the subject matter of the class is advanced and modern, the teaching technology isn't. In fact, I use basically the same technology as this 14th century classroom. Note the textbook, the sage on the stage, and the sleeping guy in the back. Just like today. So my co-teacher, Sebastian Thrun, and I thought there must be a better way. We challenged ourselves to create an online class that would be equal or better in quality to our Stanford class, but to bring it to anyone in the world for free. We announced the class on July 29th, and within 2 weeks, 50,000 people had signed up for it. And that grew to 160,000 students from 209 countries. We were thrilled to have that kind of audience and just a bit terrified that we hadn't finished preparing the class yet. So we got to work. We studied what others had done, what we could copy, and what we could change. Benjamin Bloom had showed that one-on-one tutoring works best. So that's what we tried to emulate, like with me and my mom, even though we knew it would be one on thousands. Here, an overhead video camera is recording me as I'm talking and drawing on a piece of paper. A student said, this class felt like sitting in a bar with a really smart friend who's explaining something you haven't grasped but are about to. And that's exactly what we were aiming for. Now, from Khan Academy, we saw that short 10-minute videos work much better than trying to record an hour-long lecture and put it on the small format screen. We decided to go even shorter and more interactive. Our typical video is 2 minutes, sometimes shorter, never more than 6. And then we pause for a quiz question to make it feel like one-on-one tutoring. Here, I'm explaining how a computer uses a grammar of English to parse sentences. And here, there's a pause, and the student has to reflect, understand what's going on, and check the right boxes before they can continue. Students learn best when they're actively practicing. We wanted to engage them, to have them grapple with ambiguity, and guide them to synthesize the key ideas themselves. We mostly avoid questions like, here's a formula, now tell me the value of y is equal to 2. We prefer open-ended questions. One student wrote, now I'm seeing Bayes networks and examples of game theory everywhere I look. And I like that kind of response. That's just what we were going for. We didn't want students to memorize the formulas. We wanted to change the way they look at the world. And we succeeded, or I should say, the students succeeded. And it's a little bit ironic that we set about to disrupt traditional education, and in doing so, we ended up making our online class much more like a traditional college class than other online classes. Most online classes, the videos are always available. You can watch them anytime you want. But if you can do it anytime, it means you can do it tomorrow. And if you can do it tomorrow, well, you may not ever get around to it. So we brought back the innovation of having due dates. You could watch the videos anytime you wanted during the week, but at the end of the week, you had to get the homework done. This motivated the students to keep going, and it also meant that everybody was working on the same thing at the same time. So if you went into a discussion forum, you could get an answer from a peer within minutes. Now I'll show you some of the forums, most of which were self-organized by the students themselves. From Daphne Koller and Andrew Ng, we learned the concept of flipping the classroom. Students watch the videos on their own, and then they come together to discuss them. From Eric Mazur, I learned about peer instruction, that peers can be the best teachers because they're the ones that remember what it's like to not understand. Sebastian and I have forgotten some of that. Of course, we couldn't have a classroom discussion with tens of thousands of students. So we encouraged and nurtured these online forums. And finally, from Teach from America, I learned that a class is not primarily about information. More important is motivation and determination. It was crucial that the students see that we're working hard for them and they're all supporting each other. Now the class ran 10 weeks, and in the end, about half of the 160,000 students watched at least one video each week, and over 20,000 finished all the homework, putting in 50 to 100 hours. They got this statement of accomplishment. So what have we learned? Well, we tried some old ideas and some new and put them together. But there are more ideas to try. Sebastian's teaching another class now. I'll do one in the fall. Stanford, Coursera, Udacity, MITx, and others have more classes coming. It's a really exciting time. But to me, the most exciting part of it is the data that we're gathering. We're gathering thousands of interactions per student per class, billions of interactions altogether. And now we can start analyzing that. And when we learn from that, do experimentations, that's when the real revolution will come. And you'll be able to see the results from a new generation of amazing students.
So this other video is Daphne Koller. She's one of the co-founders of Coursera, Coursera being a corporation, right, John? Yes.
It's a for-profit
For-profit
entity supporting these.
that is doing MOOCs, online education. And they're offering them for free initially, but this may change. We'll see. But this talk is a little longer, but in the first few minutes she describes why it's important to provide free education to the world. You know, beyond the United States and industrialized countries, it's very different. A very different experience for people to be able to access free education. So I can play that, or we can move on.
You thought the first couple minutes might be
Sure.
relevant, so maybe just a couple
Okay.
minutes.
Like many of you, I'm one of the lucky people. I was born to a family where education was pervasive. I'm a third-generation PhD, a daughter of two academics. In my childhood, I played around in my father's university lab. So it was taken for granted that I attend some of the best universities, which in turn opened the door to a world of opportunity. Unfortunately, most of the people in the world are not so lucky. In some parts of the world, for example, South Africa, education is just not readily accessible. In South Africa, the educational system was constructed in the days of apartheid for the white minority. And as a consequence, today there's just not enough spots for the many more people who want and deserve a high-quality education. That scarcity led to a crisis in January of this year at the University of Johannesburg. There were a handful of positions left open from the standard admissions process, and the night before they were supposed to open that for registration, thousands of people lined up outside the gate in a line a mile long, hoping to be first in line to get one of those positions. When the gates opened, there was a stampede, and 20 people were injured, and one woman died. She was a mother who gave her life trying to get her son a chance at a better life. But even in parts of the world, like the United States, where education is available, it might not be within reach. There's been much discussed in the last few years about the rising costs of healthcare. What might not be quite as obvious to people is that during that same period, the costs of higher education tuition have been increasing at almost twice the rate, for a total of 559% since 1985. This makes education unaffordable for many people. Finally, even for those who do manage to get a higher education, the doors of opportunity might not open. Only a little over half of recent college graduates in the United States who get a higher education actually are working in jobs that require that education. This, of course, is not true for the students who graduate from the top institutions, but for many others, they do not get the value for their time and their effort. Tom Friedman, in his recent New York Times article, captured in a way that no one else could the spirit behind our effort. He said, the big breakthroughs are what happens when what is suddenly possible meets what is desperately necessary. I've talked about what's desperately necessary. Let's talk about what's suddenly possible. What's suddenly possible was demonstrated by 3 big Stanford classes, each of which had an enrollment of 100,000 people or more. So to understand this, let's look at one of those classes, the machine learning class offered by my colleague and co-founder Andrew.
Sure.
Okay. So yeah, she goes on to talk about the other video that we just saw, so.
Yeah, great. So I guess I want to just go ahead and turn it over to Andrew to share with us what you've learned recently.
So a couple of months ago, I was at a Quality Matters conference in Arizona, which is it's a group of peer reviewers for online courses. So a lot of institutions are Quality Matters subscribers, which means that they have their online courses go through this review process to make sure they're up to the Quality Matters standards. Anyway, what recently happened is that they got involved with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they're actually providing money to run Quality Matters reviews, which is traditionally reserved for just standard courses for these for the MOOC courses, to see if they're at the same level as some of the just traditional online courses, to kind of get some comparisons. But the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation does have some underlying reasons for this. And they kind of outline 3 of those, one of which is to use these courses as supplements for other courses, whether it be online, face-to-face, or what have you. Those can be such as textbooks or just additional resources, which kind of plays into what you were looking at about, how does this play in with textbooks. To use it as preparatory work, and that could be prerequisite work, or potentially skipping courses in sequencing. And the idea that was kind of more for developmental education, so that people would be able to take a MOOC rather than having the need to enroll in a developmental ed course. The third reason, which is most important for us, I think, is how do these play in with higher education? So when you're looking at 100 level plus courses, can these be given credit, yes or no? What are the requirements for that? And as you can see, this is already starting to take off. There are institutions now that are regionally accredited institutions that are giving credit for MOOCs. So another thing that kind of came out of this discussion was that these organizations such as Coursera, edX, etc., are all for-profit institutions basically, except they have these very high-quality instructors developing these high-quality materials. So it's kind of it's a change of thinking from, when you compare University of Phoenix or some of those that may have the reputation for not being the same level as a traditional university, and just kind of what are they going to do with these materials and this content now that they, in a sense, own this course. And I was browsing around the Coursera contract just out of curiosity, and when they purchased the course, it's a shared ownership of the course. The university owns a piece, and Coursera owns a piece, but Coursera dictates what they do with it. The university says yes or no as far as if they can offer that or not. And in that contract, it does stipulate that they can sell this course if they want to. So, and those may be selling it to other institutions. And Andrew Ng, in his, there was a video about this, and he kind of outlined that this would extend the high quality education to those institutions of lesser quality. So in my words, not necessarily his, I was trying to find the clip exactly, but it was an hour and 20-minute presentation. And then also with, that also applies to the four-year, just the traditional four-year institution. So he kind of kicks dirt at everything other than the Ivy League institutions. Trying to think, I had one more point, but I just lost that. So anyway, that they're just kind of definitely picking up speed as a for-profit entity, and they kind of they can do whatever they want with these courses, and in a way, it leaves the instructor out of that. The instructor is no longer a piece of that contract. They're paid to develop, but then after that point, and they may be paid to facilitate the course, and kind of being there and answering not individual questions, obviously, but general thematic questions or general content questions. That's the way Coursera currently works, is that the instructor is there, posting weekly announcements and whatnot. They're obviously not responding to every single student or doing any sort of interaction with the students. But there's still that idea of once they're done with that, they can easily pull the instructor out, and then it's just a contract between the institution, the educational institution, and Coursera. And then what exactly they do with that is completely up to Coursera, so it's kind of an interesting idea. So I don't know if any of you have heard anything kind of about any of that or have any thoughts.
It's a very social media approach to running the business. You know, you were mentioning that, it brought to mind, you know, Facebook. You know, everything's free, except they own all content that you post. You know, it's this idea of, well, and Google's the same thing. You know, what they traffic in is information, data. You know, so they give away services. Well, in a way, it's the same approach, or if it's modified, it's a modification of that same approach. They give away something, and you retain rights, or, you know, you retain the property that then gets pretty. I mean, really, from a business point of view, it's pretty smart.
Oh yeah, because then they have all these courses and these packages that they can easily sell out.
Sure.
So,
If it's something that doesn't, I think it's something that if Coursera in the future takes advantage of in a way that's not in people's best interest, that this increasing the knowledge in these areas is increasing the number of people that are capable of doing the same thing and providing it in a manner that doesn't have those restrictions. A lot of my concerns over ownership of it, I think, are alleviated that. I have similar feelings about licensed software versus, say, open source software. I see a lot of correlation there, but I work in computer science, so.
So Philip, you mentioned you've taken several of these open courses.
Yeah, I did the AI one with Thrum and.
So what's been some of your experience? Did you find it, what was the quality, I guess, of the course?
So, let's see. There have been multiple ways I've done it. I've gone through, there's iTunes U has things that are more available when you want to access them. Harvard and MIT have had things like that available for quite a while. That can be, I've found useful in the past in assisting with other courses you're taking, like, hey, I need more information in this area, or this piqued my interest, and I'm going to go explore it here. So having resources like that was nice. But as far as let's say this AI class, there were some initial hurdles technology-wise and just load-wise that they really had to get through. By the end, one of the things that really seemed to work out well was this handling of questions. At the beginning of the course, there wasn't a good feeling of interacting with the instructor, but they seemed to distribute the load out by having moderators in forums or on Reddit. Actually, let's say moderators in forums that could try to answer questions, and then in general have categories, and then the professors would look over those, and if there was something that had been misleading that was said, come in and correct those. And then also have the opportunity where multiple students could ask questions, and other students could vote them up on Reddit, and basically bring the top questions that would provide the most help to everyone to the professor's attention, so they could have office hours in a sense and provide access to that. Some of the interaction with the questions and answers was a little scripted. That's something I think that can get better with building up libraries, and the first time you offer a course is definitely different than the second and the third time. And then I think a rhythm is kind of hit there. The interaction was a little strained at times. One of the courses, I'm having a hard time separating sometimes. I did Andrew Ng's machine learning and Sebastian Thrum's AI class, and one of them had like significant homework assignments, programs that were being turned in, that were being run and evaluated. The other one had assignments, but they weren't graded. And I think there's still work to be done there on how you handle that. But I think somebody's going to hit on something. I think a nice way of doing, like one thing that was starting to form at the end there, that really going forward would be useful is finding communities where there's multiple people interested in this and building up study groups around the course and being able to work together in person with people, because you do lose that on the in forums as well as in the videos. We've had a couple CS professors kind of flip the structure and say, hey, on this particular topic, go out, watch this MIT video, watch this video. We'll come back in the class, we'll discuss the questions you have, and we can delve into those specifics there. And I think that can be good. One of the problems I see potentially arising, and I think it'll cycle back and forth, is there can be a temptation that, hey, this person is the expert. This is the way that's being best to be taught, and everybody's using that. And it can kind of give you tunnel vision in different approaches to a topic, whereas when you have a model like we have right now, where we have lots of different universities, lots of individuals doing it in different manners, you have opportunities for something to come out of left field, something to a different approach. And I'm interested to see how that gets resolved.
When I look at stuff like this, what it brings to mind is a product that's being developed that's a proof of concept. And I agree. I mean, the stuff that I've read about these and the bits that I've seen about them, it's clear that there's rough patches. But at the same time, you can't deny that you look at it and you're thinking, this could work. This really could work. And I think, for me, I think it brings up a really interesting question, this sort of democratization of education. And the offering it free. And I mentioned this earlier. About 6 months ago, I had a conversation with a student. And that's not the only one I've had. Different students have said the same thing. But it's this idea she brought up. She said, this whole college thing, all you need to know is out on the internet. I don't need any of this stuff. It's all out there for free. And I don't think we should take that lightly. Because I think that, one person, actually 3 people said it at different times. You have 3 people say it to you, then there's 30 people who are thinking that same thing. It's the same idea when you build products, actual products in the development world. One equals many more. The one that actually says it to you equals many more that won't say it to you. And I think, as technologies like this and ways of doing this improve and become more seamless and actually start to work better, the inevitable question is what then is going to bring students into an institution? Because really, if the idea takes hold, and I think there is some credence to it, that I don't need to go to an institution, I just need to learn these things, all right? Then where does that put an institution? How do they handle that? I mean, it's brought to mind the sort of, the iTunes approach to selling music, where, when that first came out, this idea that you could buy one song for, $1, and publishing companies were just like, holy crap, really? Now, how's that going to work? I mean, they came around and figured out a way to make it work for them and not completely go out of, not completely go under. But it was a seismic shift in an industry. I think that this represents the potential for an equally big shift in the education industry. I don't know, it's a dirty way to say it, but that's what it is. I mean, let's face it. Everybody in this room gets paid by the education industry.
Yeah, there's a group I just found out about yesterday called Uncollege that actually helps students chart their own education off the map without an institution. My big concern is what happens to a liberal arts education, because if we start using competency-based skills as a way to grant credit, it may mean that education becomes even more equated with a job or a specific skill set that will allow you to be employed. And so with the market driving that educational scenario, I really worry a lot about what it is, for example, we offer at Western, which is that broad-based introduction to interdisciplinary study of subjects, and not everything directly correlates with the career that you'll end up doing, but you become an educated person. And studies have shown that liberal arts graduates are generally happier in their lives, succeed in longer stays in jobs, and have all these positive benefits, but it still seems like that we're fighting against the dominant culture in terms of taking time to educate students in ways that aren't immediately practical. So that's for me, I'm very excited by these technologies and the democratization of them and the way that it's opening up how people can learn and access information. I just don't want it to become reductive. So that's my concern.
Other concerns?
Well, one of the things that I think about is, and you know, I heard her message that it's making information and education accessible. But that's a different way to look at it from what the people in here who are taking these classes. It's not taking education to people who don't have access to it. It's just a different mode of education. And I think what we would have to do as a university is figure out, you know, where do we fit into that? Is the mission to do that, to take education to people who can't access it in any other way, like the example that was provided by the speaker, or is it to just offer a different mode for a different kind of learner who was brought up in a different way, who tends to learn better in that modality? And I think, you know, for us, I mean, I just think if we choose to go this route, I think we have to be real clear on what our goals are and what our expectations are. I share Don's concern about, you know, credit-bearing classes, because then they're not really MOOCs. They're not really, well, they could still be MOOCs, but it's a different way of thinking of how to teach people. And so many of the jobs that we have now involve interactive skills, oral communication, those kinds of things. And I wonder if we rely too heavily on those kinds of things. I already see it in my students who rely on those kinds of modes of communication, that it's a challenge for them to do a small group project. It's a challenge for them to interact. So I just kind of wonder about, you know, what goal do we, if we choose to go that way, what goal would we have, and how does it meet our other goals that we've always had?
I see an area locally where we have this deficiency in education, and I think Western could be uniquely positioned to address it. I definitely think there's changes that are going to be coming, but I'm familiar with computer science and more familiar with the other sciences, and I know in computer science we have a major issue with the gender ratio. Women are highly underrepresented, and research into this seems to be pointing at exposure at a younger age in the elementary school, middle school, and high school. We have a large we have a large base of talent and information here that we can get out, and we have wonderful people in the schools who are focusing their life on educating the students, and that's what they focused on. But they're not necessarily positioned to increase this interest, and our current numbers are showing that that's not working. So if we can use things like this to extend the knowledge and the expertise we have at the university level to collaborations with educators in the high schools, in the middle schools, and in the elementary schools, and build up the opportunities the students have and resources have, everybody's going to benefit from it. And that's a direction I'm hoping I see the university going in. It's a direction I think I see our college going in.
I would agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity in something like this. I think that also there's some funny selective blindness when we look at stuff like this. And we look at her saying, "Oh, we can bring, you know, education to the whole world." Well, you know, when you're in rural Guatemala, I can tell you right now, there's not a computer lab where we can sit down and enjoy these online classes. You know, so I don't think that MOOCs represent sort of the death of traditional education, but I do think they represent a significant hurdle for universities. And I think that centers of learning need to look at something like this and say, okay, how do, just like you said, how do we best use this to our advantage, and how do we, and actually be open-minded. What do we need to jettison, and what can we embrace, and what can allow us to extend how education works? Because I love the idea of, you know, more educated people is better. You know, it's always better. But it is, I mean, it is still, we're still talking about something that is, you know, education is a privilege. You know, you can extend it to more people, but, you know, you need a $2,000 worth of equipment to actually get to that education, you know. That's just as unattainable as, you know, $100,000 in tuition, depending on where you live in the world, especially if you live in an area where, you know, $500 a year is what you make. You know, so, I mean, there's that side of it, too. I think this is exciting technology, and it has its place, and it really, I think, is going to shake up sort of traditional universities. But I think it's an opportunity more than anything else.
Justina, I'm already forgetting the name of that international educator who talked to us about a month ago.
Jeff Utek.
Jeff
Yeah, I was just
Utek
thinking about that too.
argued that, in fact, mobile devices have taken over the globe, and that people still who live in villages and don't have any other form of technology, they have a smartphone, and they're connecting to these resources. So I'm not sure what the truth is in between your perception of someone in Guatemala maybe not accessing labs, but according to
I think it was Ethiopia, he said that.
yeah, Africa has about a 4.
Well, they had, in that particular country, I
4G.
believe, yeah, a 3G network for
3G
their entire
network
country.
For their entire country.
Yeah, again, they can't feed their people, you know,
They can't
all of
feed,
them.
right, there's
Yeah.
issues.
They do. Well, the reason they have those cell infrastructures is because there is no traditional infrastructure out there. And companies went in to sort of put that in as an advantage, and they do. Yeah, a lot of them actually, they're not using smartphones, they're just using regular phones. You know, I have friends in Tanzania who teach, and they do. I mean, phones get used extensively. You know, and I'm from Central America, or my mom's from Central America, so I've been in rural Guatemala in little schools. And yeah, they do have phones. I mean, it's phones, you'd be surprised where everybody's got cell phones, it seems like. But this is not that. You know, what we're looking at here, this is a whole order different, but I do think that it does represent a part of this idea of sort of spreading out education, using whatever tools these people have. I agree.
I think it forces the issue of students being consumers, you know, that there's a whole nother range of choices out there now. And so, yeah, a liberal arts education, I totally agree, is completely important. But if a person simply needed a job as quickly as possible in a field that they could get a reasonably free or cheap education that, you know, just taught them the skills that they needed, that would be a whole nother choice that they would make. Now, I'm not just saying an easy choice. It shouldn't be an easy choice. You shouldn't just be able to say, oh, I just need the skill set and I'll just live my whole life working in this one job. The real choice is about what you're talking about. You know, do I educate myself in a broader sense to be a more interested person, or do I simply pick up a skill set? And I don't think there's anything wrong with either of those if you look at them as completely separate
Clay Shirky
things.
argues in Cognitive Surplus that people's pleasure is so built around things they don't have to do for their job, learning things just because they're interested, or being involved in groups for their own enjoyment, that there's always creativity in the leisure time that we have, and that digital culture enhances that. So it's an interesting idea. Would people choose to educate themselves more broadly, or would they just go for the skill set and get in a job?
And simply the skill of making that choice is really important, if you ask me. I mean, that's a real lifetime choice you make. And being able to make it intelligently, I think, is a very important skill.
Well, that's something that Philip just said made me think too that it's an opportunity for beyond your liberal arts education as well. So a teacher in K-12 could use, maybe there could be a structure for those credits that teachers always have to get after they're already working, which can be really hard and expensive.
Yeah.
If there was a way, maybe that's an opportunity in the future for people who need continuing education. You know, there needs to be the structure and reward system, and that's what I think is interesting, is the reward structure. Why do this beyond, you know, learning? You know, is it for a particular job or for your own learning, or is there going to be some badge of you know, something that shows that you are qualified in a particular skill set? It's interesting. Yeah, there's definitely room for exploration here.
And as we have more of this showing up, which inevitably I think we will as an option, we have accreditation of schools right now. Accreditation is going to increase. And you might have companies that say, hey, we value people that have this well-rounded education, and here's this organization that will accredit these, like, that you haven't you haven't just directed all your attention at one, that you're going to be able to look at things from different angles because you've had this more well-rounded education.
Can I ask some logistical questions for the people who have taken these classes? When you sign up, I mean, you officially sign up, is there any age limit? I mean, could a 7-year-old sign up for this, or, so anybody can?
No verification, although I was looking at one. Oh, yes, okay, I was making sure I understood this correctly. It was about film noir. It was just an exploration of film noir. And it actually said, there's some explicit material that's going to be presented in this, and so I probably were going to restrict it to an age limit, but I don't know how they were going to do that other than you self-identify how old you are. That's the only one that I've seen has sort of an explicit tag on
And so
it.
you took it and completed it and got a badge, but somebody over here, you said you took it and never finished it, or what happens then? Nothing?
Nothing.
I mean, you just don't get a badge? They don't say, they don't follow up and say, why did you sign up, or you flunked or anything?
Yeah,
Nothing?
huge numbers don't complete, huge numbers don't complete.
That's what I was wondering, what happens at that, and is somebody collecting data on that, do you know? Like how many people actually engage and complete it? I mean, is it a...
Yeah, they always know.
Yeah, well, I mean, because the guy in the video, I don't remember what the numbers that he said, but I think he said, what, like half of the 160,000 or whatever actually completed. I mean, so I'm sure they're collecting
Well, I get
that data.
20,000 completed.
20,000 completed, okay.
20, okay, so that's...
I think he said half had watched one video every week.
Yeah, that's what it was.
That's what it was, yeah, okay.
But as far as so I've signed up to Coursera, the for-profit company that offers a number of these. I think right now all they know is my name and email address. That's all they know who I am. And I could easily sign up for other courses with a different email address, and I can give them a different name. And so they potentially don't even know how to connect my performance in 2 different courses.
They ask you to abide by an honor code. But
They do.
Yeah.
And their funding is not based on graduating students, so they don't have that as an issue. It's if you pay at the very beginning, that's all they need.
I wonder, is it the same thing? I went online, and I'm one of those people who just likes to learn for the heck of it outside of my field, and there was a thing about like Norse mythology, but they were like really short videos, like maybe like 10 minutes long or 15 minutes long, and I did a bunch of them. And then they sent me a thing, they kind of continually offer me these new classes. I wonder, is that the same as these? I mean, it's similar, I guess. It's not like a big, long, drawn-out class. It's just short little classes.
It sounds possible. They all are different links. And so there's one here that we were looking at called a MOOC. So it's a MOOC about MOOCs. And it's only going to be 1 week long, a very intensive study. The one I participated in, I think, was about 6 weeks, and the AI one seemed like it was a typical short quarter of 10 weeks. So they can be any period of time. And I know that Coursera, like what they were showing here, their intention was to have short videos make up the majority of the content. But then I took routine quizzes. They had weekly quizzes that I participated in, but they were rather brief multiple choice quizzes, not much more than that.
Well, these, they seem to be geared maybe even for kids or for younger people, but there was like a little quiz at the end of each one. But then they sent me a thing, well, you can get credit for this if you take an exam, they'll pay for the exam or whatever, but then you can get some kind of a credit, maybe that you could apply to college or whatever. So I wonder, is that one way that maybe they can try to get, you get some kind of credit for doing this or whatever? They have like an exam that you can take that you can apply for maybe like AP courses used to be.
Yeah, well, so they actually, as Andrew was talking about, like Coursera, they enter in agreements with universities, and the universities are actually, their faculty are offering this, and I don't know, but it's possible that in that case, that particular university would have then offered credits if you actually go through the assessment process. The University of Washington is trying this out through Coursera as well, but I haven't heard any more specifics other than they've agreed to actually offer credits to students taking engineering classes through Coursera, and they were planning to do that this year.
They have them listed.
I imagine that you've got to pay a fee to get the credits, certainly, but I don't know anything more than that.
One of the things I'm curious when I think about this is what kind of impact does something like this have on, like world government? For instance, like my family in Panama when they were younger, I mean they were all intelligentsia, And they led the revolution. Them and their buddies are the ones who led the revolution and toppled the dictator at that time. It's like you educate populace, and you know what happens to governments who suddenly everybody's has got a lot more education, or what happens to companies like Walmart that go out and just get all these people to come in and work in their sweatshops? What happens when these people have more education? I mean, what is the impact of something like that? And I think it could be potentially huge. I mean, I think it would be really interesting to see what stuff like this how things would change, and what kinds of things would suddenly shift because of it.
Revolution.
Yeah.
That's why governments are turning off their internet service.
Yeah.
So other than revolution, what other concerns anyone has?
I wanted to go back to something he said about how resources provided by universities. I feel like that's one, people are talking about what's this going to do to higher education. I think one of the major things that I as a student have found useful as a university is the computing resources that I wouldn't have access to without being at a university, like clusters and very powerful computers that I would never have access to. So I think I just
library resources also. Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah, the digital library. I use the ACM digital library subscription that this school has all the time for my research, and it's like those are the sorts of resources that I feel like is definitely worthwhile for my tuition, and also the fact that I can talk with peers in a real world experience and work with them using tools provided to me by the university. I just wanted to toss out those very useful, powerful things that I as a student find useful.
Those are useful, but I don't know how Coursera, how they do this, but I know that places like University of Phoenix, what is the one that's here in town, is that Charter College or
Governors.
whatever? Not that one, but they tell their students to go to the local university and ask for access, and so that's how they get around not having these sources. And some online universities do have sources available to their students, and just like anything else, but those are the University of Phoenixes of the world and the charters of the world. That's how they get around not having. They don't provide those sources. They tell their students to go to the local university and ask for access. So,
are students granted access by universities when they request it?
It depends. We do have community computers that are available, but they're available for a limited amount of time. Mm-hmm. But we are a state-funded, we're a state institution. We're a federal repository for federal documents, and so that means we also have to have online access to the general public because of that. Other places, you can just simply go in and ask for limited access, and you can get access. We don't do this here. I've been to universities where the computers are not password protected, so anybody can go in and access the computers for any amount of time.
Well, we're at the end of our hour.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting conversation.
And if you've signed in, I will email you the links that are on here. And anything else that come up with.
And again, our plan for January is to talk about Canvas, what we've been doing in terms of piloting a learning management system. And was that the 17th?
Yes.
January 17th at noon?
Thursday at noon.
Great. So if you're interested, we hope to see you.
And it will not be in this room, it will be in the view.
Will you? Yeah. Blackboard and chemistry.